And I'm going to start admitting all. Very nice. Hello, greetings. Happy Thursday, everyone. Carolina Wheat, Artfare curator. So happy to be hosting these broadcasts, live artist interviews, and kind of virtual studio visits. Today I have a fantastic artist. I'm so excited to talk about his work here. He's been on the platform for just a short time, well, maybe like 3 months, but it's Duy Hoàng. Welcome.
Hello, hello.
Get some of that water. This is one of the first visits I've done where someone's outside. Hey.
By the time this is done, I'm gonna have a perfect tan.
Well, I know that you had a little bit of a fumble getting. No, well, you didn't fumble. We're here right at 6 p.m. Eastern time, but we were, planning on meeting up a little earlier than this. But I don't know if you want to let folks know. Like, you're at Starbucks right now. That's happening.
I am. So about just a half an hour ago, 45 minutes ago, I'm at a residency in Florida. In the middle of a swampy area, very thickly dense with nature, which is perfect, but sometimes not perfect for technicalities for this. So all of a sudden, the entire town shut off their power, and so I had to ask my friend to basically rush me to the next town, Starbucks, and just emergency drop me off here for some Wi-Fi to be able to do this. But this is all planned. This is a performance.
Yeah, you're getting paid from Starbucks.
Yeah.
There's product placement right there.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, what is the residency called in Florida?
This one is called Atlantic Center for the Arts. Yeah.
Very good. Well, you are, you've definitely...
Really nice one.
Yeah, I don't think I even know about this residency. I haven't spoken to an artist that's done that, or maybe I've seen that an artist has done the residency, but I don't know much about it. How long is it?
For the session, I'm only here for 3 weeks.
Oh, okay. Well, you're no stranger to residencies, though. You've definitely had your fair share of getting around the world and getting your work out there in so many varied countries. And I'm just curious, like, can you pick a kind of most monumental residency or installation that you've done in a certain city?
Yeah, I mean, they all have so many different, wonderful characteristics that very unique to each one of them. So, each one of them is like a baby to me. And the way I work too is very site responsive, very site specific. So each place that I go to, I basically make an installation or a work there that I really cherish. But to pick one that may stand out a lot would be, I don't know, more so the experience of, I was on this residency called Rabbit Island, and it's a 90 acre land just floating on top of Lake Superior. And you're out there by yourself, and you're kind of in two semi cabins and no electricity, no Wi-Fi, no nothing. You're just basically with the land and being with nature. It's quite an amazing experience.
Oh my gosh. I've there's an island in Lake Superior, Island Royal. Is this familiar to you?
Sounds familiar, but I'm not quite sure where it is.
Yeah, I didn't know that there was any such residency like that. Lake Superior is my favorite body of water. Yeah. Yes, it's the deepest, the coldest, it's the freshest.
Yeah.
I like to, try to exemplify.
Right. So it's quite an experience there.
It's so magnificent. You're traveling around, you do these residencies, are very much part of your practice, but your studio is actually located in Harlem. Is that correct?
So I do work from home, but I tend not to have a studio, and that's one of the reasons why I kind of hop around with these residencies as well, is to I kind of use it as an excuse to travel and to, kind of, and my works investigate sites and, the idea of foreign sites and, home. And yeah, we can talk about that to
Yeah,
see in the work,
exactly.
but
Right. Kind of the segue into
yeah.
an Artfare artist.
And also, and also they kind of provide a space for me to have a studio for a little while. And that's what I've been kind of rely on as a studio practice.
But yeah, I was just kind of getting at the fact that, you're on the platform, yet your work is so intimately based on space or site specificity, and as well as the objects and nature around you. And it seems like it wouldn't be a nice match for an online platform to sell your work. However, it really is refreshing to see your work both on the platform and knowing that the work is collectible, but as your practice is about collection, but the work is also able to be placed in a different location. How did you kind of negotiate that with yourself in relationship to finding these site specific places, but then also creating those site specific installations for potentially another space?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think after a couple of editions that I go through these installations, the work lately becoming more of a site responsive in a way that I do a lot of walking around, collect materials, just basically observing the land, observing the surrounding environment, and then bring the materials back, but not so much of like trying to um, make sure that I create something, but more so trying to make sure that I'm paying attention to it and understand it. And so some of these large installations that you're gonna see, um, they kind of compose of a lot of small projects within it, rather than okay, this is one installation. Um, they it exists in the same space. I call them one installation because they are responding to each other. But at the same time, it's very modular as well. I'm just responding. It's like, oh, I'm making drawings here. I'm making sculptures here. I'm making prints, photograph, whatever, and they all kind of exist in the same space that become like a laboratory. So say specificity is one thing, but also it can be compartmentalized and break apart and become its own standalone pieces. So in that sense, it can accumulate into one large installations that are very specific to that place, but also can be breaking apart to kind of it interprets what I'm thinking, like my core conceptual idea that is beyond that site.
Right. And well, this slide looks like maybe it looks like an image in Japan, Tokyo.
Yeah. Maybe it's I had this whole narrative that I was gonna get into because well, I've been thinking a lot about how the show works and doing artist talks, and I don't want to show just work. Like my work is so much about sight, like I said. So I want to build, like kind of show like the atmosphere where I was observing, and the things that I was looking at, like in conjunction to what I was thinking about in the work, rather than here just the work and just look at the work. So in this sense, in this image, so this is in Shibuya, which is basically Japan's Times Square. I don't want to make that comparison, but it's kind of
pretty close. It's live.
Yeah. So I was just a little bit overwhelmed with a lot of neon signs and just massive amount of people. But I kind of started to realize that this I don't know if you can see can you see my mouse?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that giant screen right in the middle there, I think that was the biggest screen that I saw in that square. Every 15 minutes or so, it will play 2 minutes of Mount Fuji. And in this midst of all the advertisements and the loud, it's not like Times Square when when the video doesn't play sound in Shibuya, it's actually pumping, these advertisement sound onto the street as well. But all of a sudden, it just cut off and just show a live feed video of Mount Fuji, which is nothing, no sound. And to me, that would, kind of connecting to my work of thinking about, I tend to go back to the narrative of me moving to the U.S. at a young age, moving to a new foreign environment, and became very overwhelmed by it. And the only way for me to kind of understand that site and that new environment is for myself to break down and dissect that large environment into the nuances, into the detail, the minutia, and to question those little things and understand those little things, or try to at least, and then accumulate that environment back into some sort of nesting process into this elaborate environment. So it's just kind of a segue for me to kind of see this as like, oh, I'm in a new place, but then it's just this moment of silence and serenity that kind of break down that environment. See how it can go to the next image. So then I went up north to Hokkaido, and this is the space in, from the inside looking out to the Japanese garden in the space that I was making the work. But also I was there kind of, helping my friends kind of taking care of the place as well. There was a lot of work to be done, so I was helping him, kind of taking care of, like weeding the garden basically. So I come across these, decolored or, pinkish sedum weeds that I found on the yard that I kind of got really attached to, and I kind of realized that the color changed from aging, but also the chemical that the locals put into the ground. And so I was thinking a lot, again with Shibuya and that Mount Fuji, thinking about that significant relationship between human and nature, and what is our effect to it, and what is its effect to us. We become each other's caretaker, basically. So I start to weed the garden, but also bringing those materials back into this space, and just little by little accumulate them and respond to them, shifts them, arrange them. You can see some drawings here as well. So a lot of observational processes that go through my work, meaning I bring materials back, I observe it, draw it, print it, any kind of processes. So it's not so much of like it's a mixed media installation, let's say.
Yeah.
And so by the end of that accumulation, it becomes this process. This becomes this environment. It becomes this habitat that I realized that I was basically nesting. I was creating my home, my own space, my laboratories, my living and working environment all in one, just to make sense of what I'm looking at, just to make sense of that ritualistic activity that I was doing every day, from the pragmatic action of weeding the house, weeding the garden, into the hidden meanings of these natural materials that are being discarded, that are being neglected. So a lot of I also, as you can see here, there are a lot of insects and flies and bugs as well that are dead that I come across. So a lot of basically all my materials that I found are discarded materials, even if it's artificial or natural materials. They all have that same characteristic that they are discarded material.
And the work, does it lives in this space, right? These nests, yet it also dies. Some of these living things that you've accumulated. Can you just speak a little bit to the intention of, you certainly have these inanimate, well, you have books that will corrode eventually, but they're not corroding, in front of our eyes like a plant would.
Yeah.
But can you talk a little bit about the difference between once it's placed as a as a living, an object versus, 2-3 years down the line?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're getting to the idea of preservations and
Yeah, the
archives
preservation, your
and
intention. Like, do
yeah.
you preserve the natural elements within these nesting installations, or do you enjoy the decay?
I love the decay.
Yeah.
Well, I think the big part of my I think the big part of my work that I think about is this interstitial space between the potential growth versus the inevitability of decay, and how do we navigate that? Where are we within that? Like, what is our responsibility within that? And that kind of goes back to a lot of these work are actually personal narratives that I kind of inject into the work as well, where my work has changed dramatically since my father passed away about 10 years ago, and quickly followed by my grandparents. Um, and he had liver cancer, and like in his hospital room, the room right next to it was called a solarium, and the purpose of it is is for liver treatment. It's supposed to help with liver diseases, and but so there were no space for us, my family, to basically in there with him on uh, on his last days. The nurses were generous enough to kind of allow us to kind of claim over that solarium and kind of have I slept in there. Um, Sometimes I stay up all night watching him just to make sure that he doesn't go yet. Um, so so that kind of idea kind of stuck with me for a long time, and I know that I was very interested in working with natural materials and also greenhouses and nurseries, but I wasn't sure where that kind of come from. And like spaces like this as well, that I tend to become attracted to spaces that are very full with light, that are very use a lot of natural light, and in contrast to the materials that I bring in are mostly dead or decaying, on its way out. So I think about a lot about that site as the space that is supposed to kind of trying its hardest to desperately try to prolong lives, try to preserve something and carry it on. But there's a desperation that there's not much that we can do beyond what we can already attempt. And so that's where these kind of materials are. That's where I kind of become interested in the materials that I can't keep. Um, and yeah, and another point is I'm very attracted to scientific laboratories and approaches and visual, and something like natural history museum presentation as well. And the thing about those realms is that those are the realms that kind of trying to preserve something, preserve a life, trying to prolong a life, try to understand a life. And in this case, I'm kind of using that realm as preserving a memory, preserving information, the fleeting moments that I can spend with these materials that I know that will go, that will lead me. And so the remaining isn't what's significant to me. It is they go back into the ground, but what carry on is the research, the understanding of the materials and the observational processes, like the drawings, the prints, and photos. But I try not to claim these materials as mine and try to encapsulate it. I do capsules, but encapsulate it in a way that is permanent, because I still don't quite believe in that, that you are supposed to do that, or it still doesn't quite sit well with how my practice is, my system.
Yeah,
To,
the
make it
impermanent.
permanent. Yeah.
It's I mean, it definitely reflects that study, the natural history of specimens. It certainly reflects that visually, both as a kind of a sketch of sorts of your time and space researching the environment around you. And so, I appreciate the fact that you are more interested in the temporal nature of a lot of what's happening with these installations, or bringing it outside in. And I know that there's artists that have a particularly environmental practice that can kind of be in the same dialogue with some of this work, like Andrea Zattel, or and you were talking about specimens in nature, and of course the artists everyone loves to hate, the YBA, Damien Hirst, but there is that trying to recreate this shark, or $15 million shark, or however you want to say. I remember seeing works of numerous specimens and otherwise. Basically, it brings me to this kind of question slash real banging curiosity about transporting the works. Say, for instance, this work that was based in Aikido, you said?
Hokkaido.
Hokkaido, Japan, and that work, say, sold to a collector, and the logistics that has to go between the countries, and the permissions for these bugs and for these specimens and for these plants and all that, it's kind of a nightmare for a registrar. But I'm wondering, do you ever consider that, or are these pieces in your head able to be relocated? I kind of mentioned that early on, but I'm curious to your, has it been done?
It has not for me personally, and maybe that's why I'm not a registrar, because I would know where to begin. But even the difficulty of the logistic go into that is also conceptually very interesting to me as well. In term of like I think about like work. I have works before this that deals a lot with and it still is in some way, but a lot had to do with weeds and invasive species, and myself as an immigrant, was an immigrant in my whole family as well, and migration, and how does that work? Are are the plants that we take with us, are the biological specimens that we take up with us, are they invasive species? Are we invasive species that we travel everywhere and drag our feet everywhere? So in that sense, I kind of see myself as as an invasive species that try to adapt and trying to adapt and understand and morph and hopefully now better characteristics and conditions of being somewhere. So for pieces like this, I didn't think as far as transporting, to be honest. To me, it was a lot of these installations are experimental. And for me, the most important thing was to do something. Even the process itself of accumulating, I did it, in a very pragmatic way that I do it, but conceptually as well. Is I think I was conscious of how intentionally I want to push that idea that I don't know what it would look like until the very end, that I have to step away. And I think the most valuable part about art making or making anything is to be surprised by the thing that you know. If I already knew what it's going to be, then I don't think what's the point. I didn't see the point of doing that. So so for something like this, it is a nightmare to think about the next life of it. But I learned so much from it that I've taken with me everywhere in every single piece of work that I've done now. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if that's answer any logistic questions for anyone that questions the kind of thing when they look at my work, but at the same time, it's like I'll figure it out the next time if someone allow me to do something like this and actually have have an agenda for it to be.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly appreciate the fact that this, it's kind of sketching until it's done, and then you've completed the work, and it's really provided you great comfort within the research and within your concept, and then it's the final documentation, and it's there, and the disassembly and all these things. So far be it from me to be questioning these logistical commercial kind of art nightmares. It's not so much that I want to make the work any less by visualizing it, or just thinking about really transportation and further than just logistics, thinking about transplanting, which you did answer as being an immigrant, and feeling as if you are coming into a space unlike others. So I think that it matches well with the idea of the transplantation as a human, but also in the work itself. But I know you have other examples, so I'm gonna let's keep rolling on those slides.
So this is just an image of what it looks like at the end when I clear out everything, return the space to how it speak. And the friend that allowed me to do the piece, he was generous enough for. So in Japanese culture, every household, or this is how they used to do it. Every household have a sort of like a box, like a handmade box that are designated to that each family. That carries a certain number of bowls and dishes, that coincides with the number of the family. So he allowed me to use this box that belongs to this house before him, and I, create a capsule of this piece, and left it as an offering. But this, this in itself is I see it as a sculpture that acquired by my friend. And basically just build compartmentalized compartments for these, and I save one key component of each in here. So, and then after that, like a year after, I was in Switzerland, and showing these images. So that's the space that I was making work. So I was, I was just showing those images as a way of kind of showing my confrontation with the environment there was constant. The macro and the micro that I was kind of teetering in between was, it was a constant. So it was kind of translated into the work as well. That I was, always taking walks around the area and collected, trash and debris that flowed off from. That was Lake Geneva, so it's right. The space was right by it. So I, just bring back the materials that I collected, and always outside, kind of, drawing, make a lot of drawings and collecting materials, and I just spent a lot of time observing the space, and really be with the space, the land, the site, and then at the end it kind of grew into this habitat, and the one thing is, like I said, I couldn't really predict what it would look like. It's all about responding and kind of reacting to the materials and the materials that come before it as well. So in a way, to me, in my head, I'm not really a creator. I'm just a gatherer and a facilitator, just a pair of hands that putting things together that I encountered. So, in a romanticized way, I kind of see this environment as, its own ecosystem that kind of build itself, its own, organism that kind of grow and evolve into whatever it wants to be. And I'm just there to kind of give it what it needs. So over the period of time, materials kind of come together. And this is what I kind of mentioned earlier about there are multiple projects kind of exist in one space. So, in the sense, I was thinking about some drawing processes that I want to make for the materials that I took, that I brought back. So here's some drawings. And then, these drawings make me think of something else. So here's some prints, and so on and so forth. That's why it kind of become like a 3D collage in a way. That's how I kind of see it. And I used a microscope there and a binocular that I walk around with a lot, and just looking at bugs that I come across that I'm like a big what do you call it? Big Grim Reaper or something. Things just dropped it in front of me, and then I just bring it back. So a lot of these materials that I just come across them, brought back and put under the scope, see what it looks like, make drawings, take photographs, and kind of doing this macro thing as well, looking at the outside environment through binoculars, looking at the inside environment through microscopes, and kind of do this compare and contrast, and taking late algae and look at it, making maps from making drawings. Yeah, so that's that project.
It was such an exquisite place to be working. I just want to let you know too, Dee, that your microphone on your headphones, I think you have on, it's a little tricky to hear, especially if a car goes by, because I know you're outside.
I'm trying to be conscious of it.
So just be aware. I think I mostly got everything, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. If you want anything repeated, or certainly if you had any questions, always feel free to put your question in the chat and we'll get to it. But yes,
feel free to flag me down whenever you want me to repeat.
I can't hear. So this has a little bit more organization, almost feels more like a scientific gathering and study than some of the other works, because you have these numbers, or is this a found object, or did you make this? What's going on here?
So everything is found, including the styrofoam box as well that were also discarded, and I kind of was thinking a lot about that again, the juxtaposition between the artificial natural materials that are both discarded, and how do they exist together? How do they respond to each other? And so it becomes like in a way, it becomes like a form-fitting capsule for these natural materials that I brought back. They kind of exist in itself. So trash and other trash live together. And the day, that I collected them, some have poorness on them, a lot of them are dates. Just kind of, as like archiving the time and place that I come across these materials.
And are you using a label maker or using a type machine, like a typewriter, to make all of these?
It's a stamp that you kind of do what's the word? I don't know, like letter pressing, or like text. You kind of just like align each letter together on this block of stamp and then stamp it. So it's kind of a
letter press.
finicky process, but it also kind of allowed me to slow down
Yeah. And
and really agree with it.
I also appreciate the different color pins that you have, these blue or periwinkle, and then like the soft rose, and then also the white pins in
Yeah,
there. They really pull together all of the
yeah.
objects. They're really carefully considered in its composition. Although I know you are given the form, you are given the parameters, but you really made the most of it. And is this something that um, you cherish and you keep from your journey, or would you like to see this be acquired by someone that's interested in your work?
So this one specifically, I did not keep, but I'm making other additions now
Mhm.
that I might think of, you know, keeping some of the materials. I kind of walk away from a lot of these installations with just jars and boxes of some materials, but not all of them. Not a lot of them actually. I only keep very little materials, things that I've become very attached to or really want to understand more.
Mm.
I did not keep, but the next one here. Um, so I tend to make a lot of these capsules for these big installations, and these one are given to the staff that allows me to make the work there. So the
Mhm.
directors, the people that were around, I was there, and we have conversations with, and each one kind of very directly correlate to that person. And all these materials come out of that installation as well. And all these boxes are handmade, and it just I just really enjoy these very ritualistic uh, practice of offering of being
Mhm.
because I'm yeah so a lot of the work kind of highlights because so many things kind of like live together and kind of responds together to each other. I'm really interested in the idea of the symbiotic relationship that we have with our environment, the living organisms, the inanimate objects around us, even from like Shinto beliefs, um, and but that doesn't stop there. I also try to consider the people that I have those conversations with and learn from the locals and the people that tell me all this kind of information that I had no idea about the place and site. So this is just something to commemorate that relationship between human and human as well, which is
Yeah,
where ultimately I want the work to be not only the symbiotic relationship between us human and natural materials, but also ultimately how do we as human come together and look at something together and observe something together.
yeah. I also noticed, and this one's very elegant. Oh, the layering. Oh my gosh. I noticed also that you're it's in Swiss too. When you're in these different locations, do you take on the language through the research and otherwise?
Very little. I feel bad, but very little. Yeah, it's just some casual words and
Yeah.
some are more nuances that people will tell me. Oh yeah, that kind of reminds me of something. But a whole language, I would love to be able to have that ability to kind of adapt
Mhm.
and adopt something like that.
I
So I
know
would
that
love to be able to communicate beyond my
definitely.
my own my own language.
Well, just, the attempt is, I think, definitely appreciated, especially by these works as gifts, as remnants of the memorabilia that from you. It's nice to see that it says capsule, instead of caps.
Yeah, yeah,
So these little attempts, I think, are
yeah,
important.
yeah. So I try to do that in a you know in a most genuine way as possible because
Mhm.
I do feel sometimes I'm just doing it on the just out of habits of asking, but sometimes it doesn't stick, and then I feel bad that it's not sticking. So I try to do it in a way that I have to fully, really fully grabbing it.
True, and then I'm looking at like wings from a bee and other things, bee threads or otherwise. But what is it contained in? Is it like a
Oh, so these are microscopic slides. So these are the slides that go under a microscope, and it's being sealed by nail polish. That's one of the material that you can use as a sealer for the glass and the plate. Yeah. And then outside of that space, I was making this work as well. That is meant to be an insect trap. So entomologists in the field, they would set up very, doesn't have to be this elaborate. It can be just a bed sheet and some strings and a light, a UV light, and just wait for insects to come. And they can trap it, they can take it with them. But in this case, I was just kind of observing what's there, and trying to be with those living materials that are hanging around.
The work.
I have way too many photos.
Oh, you're good. Well, I think we're enjoying it. SB Harper says gorgeous and informative, and Valerie D says very interesting exhibition. And Ian Colfer says thanks, but he has to run. And nonetheless, there's something so zen about a lot of the work and your practice, and far be it for me to imply any kind of religious motifs here, but the act of grace between the environments and the elements and you as a maker, or you said you're just a what do you put yourself as, collector and so on that researches, but as a maker too, and combining these still lives, actual real life still lives, they really have such an incredible meditation to them. You feel the energy and the stillness, but also the time within all of them. So I'm sorry, I just had to get that out. What's going on here?
No, that's really good points, for sure. I think it kind of instilled in when you talk about rituals, we can't really tackle that topic without thinking about those topics. So I think that's very significant. So this was an installation at Wave Hill in the Bronx.
Oh, yeah.
At Wave Hill Public Garden, and this was so this were Silkscreen on Tyvek. So Tyvek is the materials that hikers and outdoor campers or through hikers tend to bring with them as a very light and compact material in comparison to a tent, with very little materials that you can just construct it into, in this case, an A-frame shelter, a survival shelter that is suspended. Is suspended in the space, and the outside Silkscreen image is the pattern, the ceiling pattern in the house that I grew up in Vietnam. So I think a lot about home. I think a lot about the temporality of temporary. Is that how you say it? Temporality, something like that. The home is something I can pack up and move and change and adapt somewhere. And what else is in it? Like the idea, the memories, the mental state that rather than a physical So my, as a short personal stories, where my sister came back to visit the house and realized that there was a lot of water damage through the ceiling, and she started to get these photos and sent it over to me. I have a very clear memory of these patterns, so that's where it kind of struck me of seeing them again and thinking about water damage and Tyvek and shelter are supposed to keep waterproof and keeping you from the rain and the elements. So in that sense, it's kind of like again like a desperate action calling for some way to kind of helping, fixing,
Protect, yeah.
yeah, or thinking about it, thinking about helping, thinking about fixing, rather than actually doing it. And the inside are hand-drawn materials, natural materials from this garden, as well as a camera trap, night vision camera trap that was on site of coyotes that coming in and out of this garden. That was caught on camera. And a lot of the text there are a lot of texts on there too that are from literatures and books that I was reading for the past years about that has to do with life and death. And also one big booklet in there that I've taken photos from my grandfather's hospice room that basically kind of lay out the last 3 months of a person's life, basically kind of go through the last 3 months and basically saying, by the 3-month time, they will subconsciously start to remove themselves from everyone else, kind of start to separate themselves from everyone else, becoming more into themselves, without realizing they're doing it, and there's like some timeline within that. The next few weeks, something like they've stopped watching TV, stop communicating to loved ones, stop being affectionate. So it kind of like laid that out, and it kind of struck me when I was reading it. I was basically going through that moment as well with family. So that's what that is. And then there's this. So basically, this thing is a shrine at the same time also. That I come in and light incense every time I'm in there, and it accumulates, and it sits on basically a bed of sunflower leaves that was also from the site as well.
And Wave Hill, they usually have these installations up for a few months, correct?
Yeah, this was. How long is it? I think it was a month.
1 month.
I think it was 1 month. Yeah. So I did residency there, a fellowship there, and, for 6 weeks at the beginning of the year, and then the exhibition was in the fall, so we had the time to kind of think about what we could do there.
Yeah, this is a highly personal piece. I mean, the other works are personal, certainly, yet to address some of the ritualistic aspects of all of the works, this seems to have the most solidified at practice in that sense. You're revisiting and you're lighting incense of sorts to bring the spirits to you, or this idea of protection of the tent and the materials that you're using, not to mention the photomechanical processes that you're using for the silk screening, is just very multi-layered. It's nice to see kind of this minimal object though, alongside some of the more busy clusters or nests, as you called them.
Yeah, for this one, I kind of really wanted to separate, or not so much separate, but to kind of try something else that I'm not familiar with. Trying to construct something that I'm like kind of forcing myself of, just stop accumulating. See how this sits. See what is saying. rather than constantly trying to add more and more, as I tend to do. Maybe that's so a good segue to this, where kind of first time that I show print, and so these are made from using Google Translate app, and the way, so this is full circle back to Japan, because I was using Google Translate in Japan as a tool to understand the books that I was reading, or try to at least. So the app, what you can do with it was you can use the camera and it translates on the spot through the image that is seeing. So if you hover the camera over a text in Japanese or Chinese or whatever language that you would choose to translate, it will pop and glitch basically on the screen, on the image, into English or whatever language that you choose to translate to. So in this case, I put it over nature, and and it interprets textures and these natural materials as Chinese and Japanese calligraphy, and translate on the spot into what it thinks is looking at.
That is such an interesting hack. How did you just were playing around and figured that out? These are
yeah. It's totally by accident. I was just reading a book, and right next, the page right next to it was just an image of grass, and all of a sudden it just started to kind of freaked out, and so I was like, wow. So I just took it outside to the garden, and it started to show up.
And so is this another site-specific installation of those images? Fantastic. Yes. Of the scale, I really like to see how large these are. Wow.
Yeah. So this maybe another full circle as well. Right after Switzerland, I was able to basically come back not come back, but basically help them help me. They have a festival. They have a event called Festival Images for Bay, which is outdoor and indoor, basically art that take over this entire town. So I was able to have this shown next to the lake that I was taking these images from.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that festival. And they take images and then they blow them up and put them on billboards and other things. I'm not another artist that have done that. You said this is in Switzerland?
Yes.
Yeah. And so you didn't get to choose a location, or really, did you have anything to do with the production? Really, what is this printed on? It looks like they're like steel almost benches.
So it is on paper. It is on I believe, I don't think it's vinyl. I think it's just heavy stuff. Basically poster paper. And then
yeah, repeat that one. You definitely couldn't hear that.
So it's basically printed on large scale poster paper, and then kind of overlaid under an acrylic surface over this metal structure.
Gotcha.
So it's not so much pasting on there, I don't think.
Yeah. I think it's like printed on aluminum, which you can do. You can print on aluminum or die bond, or you can mount on die bond, something that's steadfast as well. So fascinating. That's these are really incredible. Were you surprised?
So there's a lot of random text that pops out that it can be incredibly random and nonsensical, but at the same time, some of them are very direct and very loaded. Some of them will show up as, like in this case, live solitary, and there is some that says, one that says basically pollution on it, roar, dead. Some very loaded text on there. One says depressed. I think it says depressed.
Yeah, I saw that.
Risk. So in a way, I kind of see I kind of see this project as, and this project is called Vestigial structure. And what that means is it's a biology term where a species or a human, a trait like, for example, our tailbones, it doesn't really serve a function anymore through evolutions, and we kind of stop having a need for it, so it recedes back into a trait that we no longer needed. So in this case, I was thinking about how much contact and how much understanding and comprehension that we've lost with nature, and that we might have in the past a long time ago, and we've lost that ability, and now we needed AI as an extension of our senses to be able to comprehend our surroundings. But at the same time, from the opposite direction as well, where I was thinking about maybe these texts and languages are maybe the nature is trying to tell us something, that trying to warn us of what's to come, what's ahead, and we better change our way, or it's too late. It's already too late, but it's that kind of like communications that I was really interested in.
Right. I mean, just the fact that it's text, and that it was the hack from the Google Translate app and all these really interesting discoveries, they're along that same concept. And there's a few artists that have done this, but there's one artist in particular named Martin Roth, who's unfortunately passed away and wasn't able to really see through. He passed away at an untimely 40. Yet he was engaged in a project with clasping these microphones, mini microphones, onto plants, because of the communication that you can somehow derive from the tree's roots and leaves, what they're communicating to other trees and plants. There's actually another artist on Artfare that has worked on this as well, as a much younger artist, kind of experimenting, Lara Saget. Yet I'm just starting to learn more about this as someone that's very interested in sound. That communication is slowly becoming more feasible for humans to hear because of technology. It validates this communication that you speak of. Yet this is almost a fluke that you were able to get it, but it is so mysterious that it would say things like, I saw a Han Chinese and it lived like a king, and
right. Yeah, for sure. And kind of go back to what we were talking about earlier, that maybe one of some of this slide that I was showing didn't really show it, but this project exists in a lot of the installation in the past already, just living in the same environment in the background as a project that I was working on, but wasn't ready to let them kind of be its own self. And it took me a long time because I didn't know how this works, and I didn't know how it would be on its own.
Right.
And so it took years for this to finally happen, for it to be a standalone piece. But those installations is already, like, these have already exist in the background, and amongst all the projects that were happening, it is a bit dense, and I want people to kind of like dig through these materials while they're in there.
Totally. Well, we're moving on. We have like 2 minutes left.
So we can talk about other things.
No, I want to continue talking, but I just wanted to let you know that it's almost 7. So
I have more images, but I don't think it's unless you want me to flip through them really quickly.
Cool, flip them real quick.
So this was at ISCP recently, and it's still a kind of was kind of in a work in progress. But I came across 3 sets of gear bones, and I spent the entire time just cleaning them. So this kind of the space was kind of composed in a way that I was working with buckets and other lichens that I was working on, and thinking about time as well. So there are other stuff there, but basically.
Okay. Yeah. What is the stands are those little pieces of wood, and then I see the grid of string reinforcing their suspension, right? Are they standing on something as well?
Yeah, so these are all like skewers that you can buy from for barbecues. Which is, now that I said that, that's kind of screwed up.
No, that's it.
But yeah, just basically a way of displaying these materials that I was thinking of, again with I use a lot of natural history kind of way of presenting materials and kind of trying to classify them. So it's just one way to present materials. And on the floor, I stretched out throughout the entire space. It's hovered. All these strings kind of hover like a foot up off the ground.
Yeah.
You can see here. Of a grid format that I was thinking about archaeology digs, and that's what you need to do when you come across these materials, and how you can basically keep track and label materials. But for this case, I was thinking a lot about like that phrase that we talk about. Looking out into space is looking back in time. That very common phrase that kind of floats around. But I also feel the same way about archaeologies and digging into the ground. We are also, we're looking up, we're looking into the past, we're looking down, we're looking into the past. So where is our present? Like is this layer that we're standing on? Is that the present? Is that where we existing? And how do we think about this geological time or cosmic time that we kind of being compressed against? And what is that like? So that's like an ongoing thought that I haven't completely flushed out, but that's where this is kind of start taking on. But I spend way too much time cleaning these bones. And it's another ritual that happened, another repetitive rituals that happen throughout the space, and the process of holding it, brushing it, soaping it becomes a very intimate process as well. That kind of allowed me to be with these past lives that I'm trying to honor and give it some sort of significance, or giving my own meaning to what's already significant.
Right.
Yeah. So I'll just end with this. It's just a small scope. Yeah. Let's end with that.
I like that. Well, thank you so much. And I'm glad we pulled through with some of the technical challenges.
It worked.
I'm glad you made it to wherever outside in the swamps or outside of Orlando. I'm really glad that I was able to hear more about your practice, and everyone here. Thank you so much for participating as well. I feel so blessed to be able to have these conversations every Thursday. And if you miss anything, I'll get it up on the YouTube in the next few days. And again, Dee, thank you so much. I really hope to meet you in person one day. Things are getting back on track, and I look forward to that. Thank you again for sharing your practice with us.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for tuning in.
Absolutely. Bye, everyone.
Pleasure.